Hey guys, welcome back to Teen Muscle Radio and episode number 36. So today, guys, we are very, very lucky to be joined by Jeff Alberts. And Jeff, if you, for some reason, have been living under a large natural bodybuilding rock and you've not heard of Jeff before, Jeff is a very, very experienced natural bodybuilder himself, having competed since I think 19 was your first show, right, Jeff? 19 years of age?
I was 22, but it was in the early 90s though.
Cool. So yeah, very, very young, like started competing and obviously competing up till now, like over 31 years of hard training in the bag and just tons of experience, not only with himself competing, but also a ton of athletes through his coaching with Team 3DMJ, which again, if you've not heard of Team 3DMJ by now, like you'll have been not in the natural body realm, I think. And you know, it's a huge resource of great stuff with their books, podcasts, and their channel as well. So I'm super excited to have Jeff on. Like personally, I've been following Jeff for a long time. I can remember reaching out after I competed and won one of my first shows. I reached out to Jeff and I just said thank you, because all of your content that you put out had helped me not only develop the knowledge for my own competition prep, but then in future years allowed me to prep other people, and without that I really don't think I'd be where I was today. So you know, Jeff's been a huge part of me and my process as an athlete and setting up my coaching company. So yeah, I'm pumped for this, and Jeff, it's super good to have you here. How are you today?
I'm good. Thanks for the introduction, and it does make me feel really good knowing that I helped out indirectly, but directly. You know what I mean. So I think it's good that I'm able to pass on my experiences to guys like you, who then pass the torch to someone else. So it just keeps going, but. Not only that, but you guys are far ahead of where I was when I was, early 20s. I was like, so it's good to know that knowledge is being passed and things are getting better and better as we go.
Yeah, and that's the cool thing. That's, shows the development of the sport. It's like the young guys coming up are going to be potentially breeding crazy physiques as a result of training quite effectively from such a young age, which is something quite cool to think about.
Yeah. No doubt. It's crazy to think like where I was in my early 20s and seeing guys where they're at now in their early 20s. It's like night and day. It's crazy.
Yeah. No, I can imagine. Cool. Well, guys, today we are primarily going to be discussing the topic of show day. Now, the reason I chose this is primarily because Jeff has got such a huge amount of experience, like I said, not only with himself but with athletes as well, taking athletes through several show days and just gaining a whole wealth of knowledge and experience from that. And also I think that it's something that has not been covered on other podcasts so much. Like we discuss the muscle gain process, we discussed fat loss and contest prep and the mindset and psychologically like how this affects us, but not so much just the day itself. And writing out the questions, I even said in the email to Jeff, I was like, man, I've got so much to ask. Like there's such a huge topic. But we're going to cover what we can, and hopefully you guys will take home some advice to take into your show day if you're competing this year or in future years. So hopefully this will be a good resource. So Jeff, let's start off with, basically, we know that the show day itself is obviously just the icing on the cake of things. But over the years, when it comes to sort of the final few weeks and sort of preparing yourself for that actual day, just the last little touches, I guess, with regards to that last week, not so much with peaking or nutrition or anything like that, more so mentally, preparing certain items like accommodation, travel, etc. What have you learned over the years, and how do you sort of approach that final phase?
Basically, man, it's like you said, you have to realize and understand that that's the cherry on top of the sundae,
Yeah.
is that that day you have to think about, okay, yeah, you're nervous, you want to do well on stage, you know, you prepared for weeks, months, years in my case
Yeah.
for that day. But you have to go in there with the mentality of like, you know what, I'm taking that day as a celebration of all the hard work.
Mm.
So regardless of what the judges think, or if you're trying to compete with other guys or whatever, it's about celebrating your journey. Like that's your time to shine. So for me personally, when I go into shows now, it's like I'm not going to let a panel of judges dictate my success. Like I know how hard I worked. You know, as a competitive athlete, like when you get on stage, you can't control what the bodybuilders are doing. You can't control what the judges are doing. You only
Mm.
have control over yourself and how you perceive it. So to me, it's like, regardless of all that, I'm going to go out there and just have as much fun as possible, because I've done so many shows where I've put so much pressure on myself leading into shows, you know, about winning or whatever, just stressing on the little things, especially with a peak week, the
Yeah.
show day, you're stressing over all this stuff. And I wake up on Sunday morning and go, well, shit, I didn't enjoy anything because I was a stressed out mess.
Yeah.
So to me, it's like I'm just going to take all the years of work, get on stage, and just have a blast. So it's really helped me to relax if when coming at it from that mindset. And I did that in 2014 when I headed into the Pro International. It's like one of the biggest shows in the natural bodybuilding circuit. But I was just like, I'm not going to let the judges dictate. You know, if I get first place, awesome. If I get last place, who cares? Because it was my best physique to that point.
Mm.
So you know, I know deep down what's successful or not. If you cut corners, let's say you're cheating on your diet here and there, you're not doing your cardio, whatever, you get on stage and you're not at your very best, regardless of a placing, you know deep down whether you're successful or not.
Yeah.
So even if
Absolutely.
you do win, yeah, okay, maybe you get a first place trophy, but you know when you wake up the next day, you're like, oh, shit, I was probably just lucky because I cheated on my diet and all that. So just that mindset of like, okay, I'm just gonna go celebrate. It's really helped calm my nerves down.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with you in regards to people putting a lot of pressure on themselves pertaining to results based activities. Like with bodybuilding, it's just like people tend to chase just the trophy. And I know one of your big things is you try and advocate the idea of chasing the physique rather than chasing other variables like the trophy or like the accolades that you might get. You know, if you chase your best possible physique, then that's like all you can do. When especially we're in a sport that's subjective, and there's 7 people or however many judges on the table, they all have their own opinion, and that's it on the end of the day. You match the criteria as close as you can do, and that's all you can do. But I think, you know, what would you say, and this is an interesting question as well, over the years, obviously, you've developed this idea of chasing the physique over chasing accolades and trophies. But would you still say, like, in those final few weeks when you can see the finish line, is there still a large proportion of the Jeff inside of you that's like really competitive and just got that competitive drive to step next to someone and think like, I'm chasing the physique, but I really want to beat you, type thing?
No doubt. I mean, there's still a part of me that, you know, it's not about, you know, I'm not just gonna say I'm not competitive or I don't
Yeah,
care. I still want to do well when I'm on stage, and usually that competitive comes out of me once I step on stage.
yeah. I can
Because
imagine.
then it's like once I start posing, and then it's like, okay, now I'm going to try to beat the guys on my left and right. And I'll admit, you know, when I was going to that Pro International, I knew Marshall Johnson was going to be there.
Mm,
So, you know, I'm looking at, okay, that's the conditioning level that I got to try to match. I got to make sure my symmetry's on point. Like, you know, you do try to go in there and be competitive. So there is things that I do look at where I'm like, okay, it keeps that fuel going. So I use it as fuel,
mm.
but it's not the primary driver.
No,
You know what
absolutely.
I mean? So
Yeah.
it's like, but as far as that fiery competitiveness, it's not like I'm 4 weeks out and I'm like, yeah, I got to win, and I'm cranking out a bunch of curls or whatever. It's more like, okay, once I'm done pumping up, I'm getting ready to actually step on stage, and I'm like, okay, let's go get this.
Yeah.
But I'm still Yeah, but I'm in total control though when I get on stage, and we'll talk posing later. But yeah, I'm in total control when I'm out there. But I am competitive.
Good. Yeah. No, I think that's good to note, because I think, taking in your message is quite clear to see why we chase the physique. But it's good to have the reminder that we're in a sport where we still have however many people to ideally beat on stage, and it is a competitive sport that's not only within yourself but other people. It's just the decision that comes from the judges that is something that you need to put at the back of your head, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So when it comes to and I know that you'll have athletes like this where potentially you're competing quite a far away from home, and it might be even in like an abroad country or something like that. So with regards to how you've dealt with that in the past, maybe in terms of preparing meals or organizing travel arrangements, how have you dealt with that? Because I know that a lot of people do tend to potentially travel to shows.
Yeah, it can be quite stressful to travel distance. So you gotta plan ahead.
Yeah.
That's the bottom line. You got to, okay, well, here's your show. It's on a Saturday. Try to get to that city or that hotel, at least a couple days in advance. That way, the main thing is to really, ideally, is the environment that you're prepping in, like your daily routine. Like you have a structure, you have a nice flow when you're at home doing things. You want to basically try to set that up where you're going. So if
Yeah.
you get there, let's say your show's on a Saturday and you get there Friday night, you're going to be a stressed out mess because now you're trying to put everything in order in a short time span. Whereas if you get there a couple days ahead, if you could afford it, because, obviously it costs more to stay in hotels a little bit longer, but that would be ideal because that way you have time to get everything in order. Your meals, the timing of, let's say, tanning or the check-ins, the polygraph testing, all that. If you get there ahead of time, you get it all situated, then you can, instead of on Friday night rushing to scramble to get all this stuff in order, Friday night you're chilling. You're chilling watching some, I don't know, NFL Network or some sports game. You're just sitting there relaxing. That's what you want to do when you're you're going to be competing the next day. You want your nerves to be settled. You want basically a calm environment because you're going to peak better when your stress levels are lower.
Yeah.
If you're super amplified with stress, your cortisol level is going to elevate. You're going to probably tend to hold a little bit more water than you would if you're just sitting there chilling on the couch. So that was something I made it a point when I traveled in 2014 was to get there at least 2 days ahead of time so I can get everything just smooth sailing. When I did the Worlds, it was a little bit more chaotic, and that was just I think one of the questions was about who you're traveling with and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
It does make a difference, and I'm sure we'll get into that. But yeah, just in a nutshell, though, plan ahead, get your hotel situated, where you're going to stay, your food. Like if you're traveling, you get off once you get your hotel settled, all that, find a grocery store, get all your foods that you need, get everything in order, basically. So you have the same environment from what you do typically on your regular days at home. Make that environment where you're going to be at.
Yeah, no, I see that a lot, and I can relate with that even myself. Like I've been in situations where I've rushed up to venues and been just a giant stress bucket trying to organize everything, and
Yeah.
and then you end up making a mistake. Like I've made a mistake in the final few days of a peaking process because I've just not been in my usual routine. Like the little things, like if you don't bring your cup, which you usually drink water out of, and you start drinking water out of like tiny little cups.
It's these little things. Like I've had guys like, "Hey, I don't have this or that." It's like these little tiny things, and they're like a big stress ball. And I'm like, it's okay, man. That one little thing's not going to affect the big picture. You relax, So just I would, even doing 30 shows. There's been shows where, okay, they've been a little bit more perfect than others, but I have yet to have a 100% perfect peak. And I'm talking about not just with the way my body looks, but with like how everything is just smooth.
Yeah.
I would say the Pro International was one of those shows where just everything aligned perfectly.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's kind of rare, and you kind of have to embrace the fact that you are going to make mistakes. That's why I recommend athletes to compete more than once per year. If they're going to compete, at least do 2 shows, because the first show you're going to jack up.
can learn something from it.
Some things will go well, some things are going to go bad, but at least you have another show to improve upon. You know, you can improve the little things. And it's not so much, you know, okay, yeah, try to get leaner, yada, 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 but it's more about, okay, how can I fine tune that peak process to make it a little bit more smoother?
Yeah, absolutely agreed. I think, you know, when you're dieting for so long, like, you know, 20 plus weeks of dieting, I almost couldn't do that with the goal of just one show. I think I'd always have to have one or two in the bag just to think like, okay, well, if I learn something from this one, I can go on to the next one, and take it forward. Obviously, if you're preparing for just one huge big event, like for you maybe Worlds or something like that, it's a bit different. But if you're prepping for just one regional show, it might make an influence to do sort of slightly more than one. Cool. Okay, so we also know that when it comes to presentation, a lot of things are sort of key when it comes to that. So with tanning and preparing your process towards tanning, I see a lot of tanning processes go wrong, and I'm sure you've seen a lot of tanning processes go wrong in your time. So what have you learned over the years with regards to tanning in the whole sense? So like, talk about as well if you've got any preference over people gathering color over time in the weeks prior to the show, so using sunbeds, etc., and then also sort of different products and preparing the skin, etc., before the tanning process.
Yeah, because I've done so many shows in the 90s, 2000s, and now here we are in 2017. Back in the day, I relied on, like, you know, just the typical self tanners.
Okay.
But I'm very pale, so it would literally take, gosh, like 10, 12 coats of this stuff to even get me dark enough. And then it ends up looking really blotchy and messy. So I've done the let's go do the sunbed thing and got real nice base tans and used like Pro Tan, and it came out really nice.
Yeah.
But I mean, sitting in tanning beds for days and weeks on end is not the most healthy thing to do for your skin.
No.
So to me, I don't really recommend that anymore just because of that. I'm like, this sport is not that important to really think about damaging your skin, you know?
No way.
Yeah. So, you know, if some shows permit Dream Tan, I think for bodybuilders, male bodybuilders, that's probably the best color on stage. It's messy.
Which one out of interest, Jeff? Because I know there's two.
There's actually there's going to be there's a third one, I think, now. There's Dream Tan 1, 2, and 3. Dream Tan 1 is the gold color, which very rarely do I see people look good with that color. My brother uses that, and for some reason it just is awesome on him.
Makes you
I
look
put
like
it on.
Statue.
Yeah, it doesn't look too gold for him, but for me it looks terrible.
Yeah.
But Dream Tan number 2 is usually like that's the red bronze. That looks pretty good on most people.
Yeah.
But now they have a number 3 where I think they just combine the two colors together.
Okay.
But I haven't tried it, so I have no idea.
Okay.
It's messy, but it looks great on stage. Doesn't damage your skin. You know, basically you could apply it the night before. You could apply it the morning of. You're good to go. I prefer to do it the morning of, just because you don't want to do it at night because your sleep's going to be terrible. It's basically you're sleeping in mud. So I think that sleep the night before is pretty important. You get a good night's rest. So I'm like, I'll just do it in the morning. So that usually works pretty well. But as far as like the tan, like the show tanning, like where you go and you pay for the service, and it's been hit or miss. Like there's some that are really good at it. There's some that aren't so good at it. And I think if the Dream Tan's not allowed, then that's usually the route I recommend to my athletes, because it's just like you don't have to stress on applying Pro Tan, applying Jan Tan or whatever, like those self-tanners, because that shit takes literally – it's like an all-day process. It is, and sometimes 2 days or 3 days, and that could be a huge stressor. The only downside to those people who do it, sometimes some of them aren't that great. I just had an athlete compete at Body Power, and he was just saying that it was terrible.
That's
so, but my thought is, okay, if majority of competitors are going that route in that show, then everybody's going to look the same.
Yeah,
everybody's got a bad tan, unless your skin just happens to be, you know, takes it pretty well. So you kind of have to look at it that way. Like, yeah, it might look shitty, but maybe everybody else looks the same. So, but it's one of those. I would say it's a hard decision to make. For me personally, I have a hard time letting someone else do my tanning because it's just that trust factor. Like,
Mm.
I'd rather keep the control in my hands and do it myself if I have to go like a self tanning product.
Yeah, yeah, I'm the same. I'd agree. I'm stubborn with everything. I'm stubborn with anyone controlling my macros or anyone controlling my tan or anything like that. So I think that once you've found like a process that works well, I think it's just probably good to practice it and stick with it. I think something that I did before my first shows, I just practiced a little bit with the tan just to check how it set and how it worked and sort of how the application process was. We're lucky in the UK because we have a product called, and not a lot of people use it, but it's called Dark As. And it's made by the people that sort of are quite affiliated with DFAC in the US.
Yeah.
And that is dark. Like it says it's dark, and it is dark. So all you need is like one coat the night before and one coat in the morning, and that's it. And it's like like Protan in terms of the application.
Exactly. Yeah.
I've used, like, anecdotally, I've used Dream Tan as well. And I found that it was good. Like, the color was great, but like you said, it's messy.
It's messy.
It can rub on clothes and things like that. I needed like a top up when I was backstage because it sort of rubbed on things. Have you got any recommendations as to? I know it sounds silly, but like what do you wear? Like, what clothing wise do you wear on the day, and like how do you recommend to competitors to like not get tan on stuff and sort of like make sure that you're not like rubbing on stuff?
Yeah, I mean, if you're wearing Dream Tan, you have to realize that it's gonna get messy.
Yeah.
You're gonna ruin your clothes. You're gonna get all of your clothes. But I would say if you are using Dream Tan, because a lot of the venues don't like it because people are careless and then they rub the walls. So if you are wearing that, I would just say be a little respectful of the venues because it's a great color to use on stage. And if the more and more these promoters keep pulling that product, then for me personally, it's like I'm gonna have to rely on other tanning products, which I don't really care for too much.
Yeah.
But yeah, like for me personally, I'll wear like old sweats, old t-shirts, an old long sleeve sweatshirt. That way my arms are covered so I don't get it rubbed all over everything. I don't get my car dirty.
Yeah.
The hotel and all that. You just basically old clothes that you don't care about.
Yeah.
I still have the same sweats and same shirt and same sweatshirt that I wore like 3 years ago. I'm gonna wear it again this year.
Amazing.
Yeah. So
cool, wicked. And finally, whilst we're on tan as well, do you have any advice as to what competitors do for their face and how to tan the face effectively?
Yeah, I'm really a perfectionist. So I'm like, whenever I go to local shows and I'm helping out my athletes, they'll vouch for me. I make their face as pretty as I could possibly make it. Because you don't want to go up there with a brown body and a white face. I mean, that looks weird, you know?
Crap, yeah.
So it's like, and when you get your photos taken and you're like, I could look at my shows from 10 years ago and go, okay, it looks good. You know, you want to have good photos. You don't want to be like mismatching your face and all that. So I'll make sure that I take the time, make sure like everything is done on the face, in the hairline and all that, so there's no white showing or anything like that. Yeah. And even my stepmom, I remember one show I did, this was back in the mid-90s. You were up there on stage, but you didn't do your ears. Your ears were all white.
Mm-hmm.
And so she pointed that out. I'm like, all right. So I had to, for the night show, I had touched up my ears so there was no white on my ears. So the little details matter. When you're on stage, you want to look polished, you want to present yourself well, and you want to look like you're professional up there. You know, so if you're up there with a mismatching face, same thing with posing. If your posing is off, it's gonna stand out.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you use sort of like makeup pads or anything like that when you come to apply it on the face or anything like that, in terms of just making sure that it fits?
If it's Pro Tan or Jantana, then yeah, it's those round little pads.
Yeah.
But if it's like Dream Tan, it's mainly like I'll use the palm of my hand or I'll use my fingers and just kind of get in the cracks and crevices kind of touch it in there, make sure everything's covered.
Yeah, sure. Okay, cool. So yeah, moving on to sort of like closer to the show day itself in terms of the physique. Now, when competitors get into like hotel rooms and they have this different environment like we talked about, the idea of looking at the physique and analysing the physique becomes slightly more difficult, because for the last 20 plus weeks you've been waking up looking at the same mirror in the same lighting, and now you're in a different environment. So what do you have in terms of advice for competitors in terms of analysing the physique? And because obviously we want to make sure that we're perfecting the peaking process as much as we can. So how do you recommend competitors maybe send across photos to you or analyse the physique in these final stages in a different environment?
Yeah, it's rough because the lighting's going to be off at some hotels. You guys just got to try to find the best lighting in a hotel room. If there's a light source like a curtain or something, windows. So if you could find take your pictures next to windows or just the best lighting you could find in there.
Yeah.
But you have to understand too, is like, if you've done everything you're supposed to do leading into peak week and you're shredded where you're supposed to be, not a whole hell of a lot's going to change unless you really jacked up that peak. You did something crazy during peak week.
Yeah. Okay.
So I can tell you, the guys that are ready a week ahead, not a whole hell of a lot changes that week. Like, I have one guy going right now in France, and he's shredded out of his mind. He's looked the same every day this morning during peak week, with maybe just a touch fuller because we backloaded him.
Nice.
But he is hard as shit every morning, regardless of the lighting. It's like nothing's going to change because his routine, it's basically the same. He doesn't change nothing. All the variables are consistent. It becomes very robotic.
Yeah.
And you hear like bro diets, you hear, oh, don't be bro this, bro that. Because he's being more broy and everything's robotic, their variables they're not changing. So everything is consistent.
Yeah.
So let's just say you wake up on show morning. If you've done everything you're supposed to do and it wasn't like an outlandish peak process, not too much is going to change from Friday to Saturday morning if you've done everything you're supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
So that kind of gives me, in my mind, okay, that's some comfort knowing that. But yeah, as far as the light source and all that, you just do the best with what you got.
Yeah.
But if you have like different lighting, there's a lot of shadowing, or it's like it's going to be tough to tell from your normal environment to that new environment for sure.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That makes sense. I think, what you say in terms of just trusting the process and getting into that robotic routine. I think that's something I've seen, just like a correlation between the people that just look good and consistently bring really great physiques. The people that do get quite robotic, especially towards the end, like they're not having loads of variations in their meals. They're just quite set in stone. And that's something I try to do myself. I woke up on one of my show days and just literally did every single thing that I'd do at home. And I was just like, well, if I do everything, I'm just going to look how I look when I go and pose after I do my cardio on a normal day. And I did,
And you take notes ahead of time. So, let's say you're 3-4 weeks out, 2 weeks out. Take notes during the day. Okay, I wake up in the morning, I'm flat. Midday, I look a little fuller. At the end of the day, I'm much fuller, harder. If you take these notes, then it gives you comfort. As long as you're keeping all the variables the same like we talked about. Then on show day, okay, here's the timing of the show. You have to plan ahead. Okay, when do I think I'm going to be on stage?
Yeah.
So basically, it's like your normal everyday environment, the way you're eating and all that. You try to match it up to the show timing. So if it means you got to wake up at 3 a.m. to start eating because you're full or like 8 hours later, then you need to move your shit back. Wake up early so you can start your day earlier. So then when you get to the stage, you're kind of matching up your best look to your normal environment.
Yeah, it's interesting that.
And so if your show starts at 10 in the morning, you wake up at 7 in the morning, you're not giving yourself enough time to get some meals in and to look your best. Yeah. So you have to plan ahead, get your environment set up to where it does help you to peak and relieve a lot of stress that way too.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. I hadn't actually ever thought about that in terms of waking up earlier to sort of make sure that you're looking how you want to look at the right time. That's a really interesting
Yeah.
point.
So I just had today I had a guy in France today. Yesterday I had a guy compete in Kuwait.
Okay,
Um,
wow, cool.
yeah,
Mhm.
I was like, okay, man, guy in France, you got to get up at 3. The other guy, I think, it got up at 3:30. I think it was 3 or 3:30, somewhere in there.
And would they
Started to
just
get the
sort of
meals.
like sleep in between meals and just to make sure that they're still getting enough sleep, or would they just sort of stay awake?
That's self-choice, but I
Yeah.
don't think I don't think you're gonna go back to sleep on show day. I think
Nah, definitely not.
you're gonna be amped up and ready to go. Yeah.
Cool, awesome. No, I think that's a really good point. I think people can take away from that because I think like I said, I hadn't even thought about it. I think a lot of people won't even think about that. They'll just think, I'll just wake up at my normal time, I'll do my normal meals, and I'll just look how I look. And that's potentially why some competitors always say, "Oh, I look better at the night show when there wasn't so much judging going on," like because
Yeah.
they've actually just got that's when they've got most of their food in and they look their
Exactly.
best.
That's
Cool.
happened to me a few times on my shows. Like at Worlds, I was flat at prejudging, and I was like, if I would have looked like I did at the finals for prejudging, it might have moved me up one slot.
Yeah.
So yeah, I know now. Okay, I need to make sure that I'm getting in enough food and probably waking up a little bit earlier and all that. So yeah, it was a good learning experience.
Yeah, absolutely cool. So we kind of touched on it already in terms of you saying you need to just basically do the protocol and keep things similar and stay in your routine. But a lot of people, and I've actually had people that have other coaches message me like the night before the show saying, "Oh, AJ, my coach has asked me to have this weird meal or this glass of wine or this crazy thing that I've not had in 20 plus weeks." So
Yeah.
just so people can hear it from the top, hear it from yourself. What's your opinion on these silly protocols where a new meal comes in that you've not had in so long, or like having a glass of wine or all of this stuff? Like, what's your opinion on that?
Yeah, I don't. I think that's probably not a good idea because if you're all of a sudden eating this weird meal, that you could have a reaction. Maybe your body doesn't digest that too well.
Yeah.
Um, the wine. I'll tell you a story. I forget which show it was. So a few years back,
Okay.
backstage there was a female competitor. I can't remember if she was figure or bikini, but she was having the wine. And I think, the wine, okay, we're going to dry this girl out. So I don't know if her coach told her to do it or what, but she was drinking wine. She was tipsy backstage.
Man.
I mean, you have to factor in if you've dieted for weeks and weeks and you're pretty lean and all of a sudden you have alcohol, you're going to be really sensitive to that. And it's not going to take much for you to feel tipsy.
Yeah.
so, so yeah, it was like, you don't want to do anything voodoo-ish or crazy the last minute. Because again, the way you're going to peak for a show is not these silly things the day of or the day before or any magical protocol like one day out or something. It's the weeks that got you to peak week. That's the most important step of peaking for a show is getting in condition ahead of time.
Yeah. Yeah, no,
So if
totally
you're
agreed.
yeah, so if you're not in shape, a week out or even the day of, it's not going to happen just by drinking a glass of wine or eating some crazy meal. It's not gonna happen.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, when people have sort of asked me about the wine, the only thing that I've sort of said is I just say, well, if it really if it helps you sleep and it helps control nerves, then maybe. But then at the same time, if you haven't had that sort of thing for so long, it's probably best just to avoid it because you don't know how you're going to react to it at all. And like you
Yeah,
said, like I can't even imagine my alcohol tolerance right now, but it's pretty damn low.
yeah, yeah,
Just because I don't drink alcohol at all. But maybe for someone that drinks alcohol on a regular basis, you'd be able to attest to your tolerance a bit more. But for most, it's a bit ridiculous. And yeah, backstage, I've seen some weird stuff as well. Like I've seen
oh yeah,
guys like nailing niacin tablets and
yeah,
getting
yeah.
flush and feeling like horrific on stage.
I had a guy, I kid you not, he passed out next to me on stage. This was back in 2000 when I did an NPC show, which is non-tested.
Yeah.
So on stage, this guy literally passed out and his head slammed into the ground.
Oh.
Well, we found out basically he took some diuretics.
God. God.
Yeah, so basically he was severely dehydrated. It was
Yeah.
pretty scary. So I've seen some crazy, crazy stuff backstage over the years.
Yeah, yeah, I can imagine. That's a testament to playing around with your body, and that's what you're going to get. You're going to get weird fluctuations, and you probably could have looked fine just without them, but that's it, I guess. Cool. So we mentioned this again, like just we touched on it a little bit with regards to sort of competitors waking up flat. Now, is this something that you just see across the board? Like, because obviously when we sleep, we don't have water, we don't have food in our system, we wake up flat. Now, have you had any situations potentially when peaking clients where they wake up and you're like, wow, you look like really, really good, you look very full? And how do you think that potentially happens? Or is it 90% of the time people wake up flat?
I would say that most people wake up flatter than later, like in the evening. Let's say they're a little fuller. I think yeah, you're gonna look flatter. I've seen
Okay.
athletes wake up full in the morning, but
But
still
still
flat
not.
and still flat
Yeah.
in comparison to what their fullest look is.
Okay.
So to me, I'd like if I have an athlete that wakes up looking pretty decently full like that, then the show day it's not okay. I don't need to feed this person, a crazy amount of food, because
Mm.
once they start eating a little bit, get a little bit of water in them, more sodium, they're gonna fill out.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's pretty normal that most people are gonna look a little bit flatter than they normally do, like
Okay.
in comparison to like afternoons and evenings,
Okay.
for the
Cool.
reasons you mentioned. Yeah.
Yeah. Sure. Okay. Wicked. Now, with athletes that I've seen and with myself, I tend to notice that signs of flatness come in specific body parts. So you'll notice that when someone is flat, this body part tends to just fade, or this body part tends to fade.
Yeah.
How do you spot it with your athletes? Is there any tricks and techniques that you've used over the years to think, wow, okay, this competitor has woken up very flat. We need to do something about this. And more to that, what can you actually do on show day to potentially feed up? Because obviously we've only got a certain amount of time before that competitor's stepping on stage, and a simulation of carbohydrates is going to take some time.
Time. Yeah.
What can we actually do? But yeah, sorry, that was sort of two questions in one, so if you're able to answer that.
No, that's fine. So the first question is like how I identify flatness. I think like kind of like you said, like if you're prepping an athlete or you see it on yourself, where your body parts, through the course of the prep, what's flat.
Mm,
Like for me personally, it's my back. When
okay.
I'm flat, my back looks like it's flat. So that's a good indicator for me of flatness and fullness. Some athletes, it might be their glutes. One day their glutes are shredded, and then the next day all of a sudden they're not shredded. You're like, okay, how'd that happen? It's not like they gained a bunch of fat. So
Mm,
it's just a matter of fullness. So it's just you have to kind of identify what, like you said, what body parts you can spot it the best on. Um, so hopefully that kind of answers that question. But
yeah,
as far
sure.
as like, okay, the other question was, remind me again, part two.
The other question was part two. What can you do when competitors do wake up flat? Like, what can you actually
That's
do
right.
to fix that?
Step one is to get up early enough so you can fix it. So it goes
Hmm.
back to the make sure you're up early enough, because if you're up at like 10, your show starts at 12 or 1, it's not going to be enough time to fix fullness, because like you said, it takes time for those carbs to basically digest and get assimilated. So if you are super, super flat, just make sure you're well hydrated. Like the first thing I do when I wake up for my shows is I drink about 16 to 20 ounces of water first thing, because usually
Okay.
you're dehydrated when you wake up.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so
Yep.
let me
Yep.
get some water in me so I fill out, and you'll be surprised what that will do. You'll start to fill out a little bit. But then it's like maybe it's just a matter of, okay, let's say if your game plan was to eat 60 grams of carbs per meal, maybe it's 70 or 80, maybe a little bit more food, a little more carbs that might help, might be more sodium. So
Mm.
maybe, let's say you're supposed to take in 3 grams of sodium that day, maybe, okay, let's pump it to 5 or 6,
Yeah.
double it up. So a lot of times athletes, it's not carbohydrate flatness, it's more like dehydration flatness and sodium flatness. So
Yeah.
I've
Yeah.
seen athletes where I'm like, I look at them like, okay, you don't look flat per se, but you just don't have that pop, and it's because they're more dehydrated and sodium flat than they are carb flat. So especially if I know, like, okay, if I had the peak, let's say they're backloaded them, they're eating 400 or 500 carbs for like 3 straight days, and their typical low days like 200 to 300. Then in my mind, I'm like, there's no way this person's flat. We didn't like do these crazy workouts or a bunch of cardio, so there's no way this person's flat. It's like, okay, I just need to make sure they get enough, food, or not food, but sodium and water in them. So it might just be that, So it's always good to have some extra sodium on hand in your bag. Make sure you bring plenty of water to your shows. So you have to look at those variables too.
Yeah, that's really interesting you point that out. I think the specific point that I kind of like there is with the glutes, because a lot of people, when they see glutes go flat or soft, they'll probably think the opposite. They might think, oh, I've spilled, like I've lost detail there. But in reality, it like you said, it's probably going to be the fact that you're potentially flat. But I guess spotting that throughout your prep is very integral to know the difference between, okay, right, I've actually spilled here, or I'm just flat and I need to eat up. Like sodium water flatness as well is very interesting.
And again, if all your variables are consistent, then it's not like all of a sudden it's like you're going to be spilled over unless you just ate a ginormous amount of carbohydrate, ginormous amounts of sodium, more than you normally would do. Especially if you're not like depleted ahead of time, like if it's just pretty consistent. So if you're depleted ahead of time, like really depleted, then it probably won't spill you if you're doing that, where you're eating a ton. But if everything's pretty consistent, all of a sudden you eat a ton of food, then you're probably gonna look spilled.
Yeah. That makes total sense. So you kind of alluded to the fact that you might have a structure to your day when it comes to show day foods, and I actually sort of asked a brief following that I have as to whether they've got any questions for you, and the most generic question was what we do with regards to macro setup for the actual show day itself. So when it comes to giving your athletes a plan for show day, what does that tend to look like in terms of the structure? Is there any specific structure towards having higher carbs in the morning, tapering down to the show day, and how do you sort of give that to your athletes?
It's basically I set up a structure based on when we think they're going to be on stage.
Okay.
So it's hard to gauge because if let's say prejudging starts at 10. If your class is maybe fourth in line, fifth in line, then you kind of have to kind of estimate, okay, when are you actually going to be on stage? So that's the first thing, and it's hard to gauge. So it's like if you think you're going to be on stage at noon, let's say, and we want to get, let's say, 4 meals in ahead of time to kind of have that same look we have in the afternoons or evenings, then we got to set your timeline up as far as when you're going to get up and start eating. Yeah. And I personally just like to kind of keep the food levels consistent with each meal, not like have these ginormous swings, like super high foods first meal and then low later, or vice versa. So that way your body, that way you have time to digest and everything's not, in indigestion or anything like that. So basically it's just kind of keep things kind of the same with each meal. And of course it depends on the experience level of an athlete. Like if I have an experienced competitor and they're usually the ones that are more robotic, they're going to be eating the same foods for the most part all the time. I don't have to make a meal plan for them.
No.
I'll ask them what they're eating ahead of time. Hey, okay, what's your carb sources? What's your staples? Your carb sources, your protein, and fat sources. If I see anything outlandish on there, or if I feel like it's okay, maybe there's not enough potassium coming in or something like that, then I'll say, okay, let's put maybe a potato in there for your first meal. That way you're covering your bases with potassium. But for the most part, experienced athlete, I'm going to let them set their own meal plan, but I'm going to assign the macros for each meal. Basically, okay, here I want you to eat at this time, this time, this time. This is the macros that I want you to eat at this time, this time, and this time. And I'll set up like sodium levels for each meal. I'll set up those guidelines. So things are structured, but they have their own control as far as what the foods are going to eat because they've been doing this for so long. Whereas someone who's inexperienced, I'm going to probably create a meal plan. Like I'm like, okay, these are the foods you're going to eat. This is the amounts. This you really make it more detailed, so they don't do something crazy. Or they have someone at the show backstage saying, hey man, I heard if you eat a chocolate bar, this will do this for your veins. And then they do it and screw things up. I've seen that happen before.
Yeah,
where
yeah.
then it's crazy. Like you're working with a coach for weeks and weeks and weeks, but then on show day you got some other athlete telling you some outlandish, and they go with that because their nerves are so rattled on show day. They just do it
I know,
out of
yeah.
insecurity.
Yeah.
So yeah, I really like to have more control with more of the athletes that are like first timers or just inexperienced in general.
Yeah, yeah, totally agree with that. What would you say the role of dietary fat is on a show day? And would you say that you've seen any sort of potential improvements in vascularity or fullness as a result of increasing dietary fat in some of those pre-stage meals?
Yeah, it can help slow down the digestion a little bit. So
Okay.
yeah, yeah. I don't like go crazy like I hear I'm gonna have to throw a shit ton of fat at you, but it's yeah. I'll make sure that there's enough fat in there so their normal day. It looks again going back to what their normal days look like.
Okay.
That's what I kind of stay right around. I don't like to do anything crazy.
No, okay. Yeah, no, that makes sense because obviously the more variables we increase, like we said earlier on, the more variables you have, the more variable the look. So yeah, that makes total sense. Um, okay, so when it comes to like actual stuff that you would say people need to have on them on show day, obviously we know that you've got set structure to your meals. Now this can potentially change as a result of how you feel or look on the day, so is there
Sure.
anything or any items of food or snacks or anything that you
Yeah.
ask your athletes to keep on them during the day?
Yeah, extra food, definitely. Like, definitely, you want to have at least a fourth or maybe half more than your normal,
Yeah.
just in case you are like really flat or something like that.
Okay.
And you want foods that look more along the lines of what you typically eat. You know are going to digest well, aren't going to cause any stomach issues. So it's like things like rice cakes. It could be bread or something like that, like white bread or like I go with Hawaiian rolls. I don't know if you guys get them there, but
Okay.
they're really tasty for one, but they digest really easy.
Yeah.
So things like that.
Is that like
Extra sodium.
yeah, yeah,
Go
yeah,
ahead.
yeah. Is that like sushi rice with the Hawaiian rolls?
No, it's like a bread. It's like a
Oh,
sweet
it's a
bread.
bread. Oh, okay,
Yeah,
interesting.
it's a sweet bread. Yeah. The like extra sodium,
Yeah.
just in case your sodium flat, you have that extra sodium with you.
Okay.
Plenty of water. Make sure you have your posing trunks.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that's happened before where they're like, oh shit, I don't have my trunks. Um, I would say a couple pairs of posing trunks. That way, if you get like a lot of tanning on the first pair during prejudging, you have the clean ones for the night show.
Mm.
Um, what else? Just extra pair of clothes, baby wipes for to clean yourself off and things like that.
Cool. Cool.
Don't forget your wallet.
Yeah. No, that makes sense.
Yeah.
um. Cool. Okay. So when we get to the actual backstage at the show, this is where a lot of competitors will sort of get. I've had competitors in the past sort of get a bit stressed or a bit confused about how they're going to be pumping up, like how much should they pump up.
Yeah.
And this is something that obviously again is just the icing on the cake. But have you got sort of any tips or advice that you've learned over the years with regards to pumping up and making sure that you're
Yeah.
ready for the stage?
I think that's a more important aspect than I don't think it's talked about enough, to be honest with you. Um,
Mm,
True story. Pro International. I'm getting ready to pump up. These are pros, mind you. They're pumping up like there's no tomorrow. It's almost like a full blown workout. It seems
workout.
just the intensity and um, they're going super fast pace. And in my mind, I'm saying, okay, because they're pumping up so hard and they're just like doing it a lot. I'm like, okay, when I get on the stage, these guys are gonna gas out. That's what happened. That's exactly what happened. Because when I was on,
Yeah.
after about three poses, I could hear the guys around me huffing and puffing, and I was just like
Sweaty.
breathing out my nose and in total control. So pumping up, you should have poise. It's like make sure you're first things though. Find out when your class is going to go up. Don't rely on the guys backstage to tell you when to pump up. If you see the class or two ahead of you getting, they're pumping up, they're getting ready to go on stage. take it upon yourself to start pumping up when you should be pumping, not rely on someone to say, okay, it's time to pump up. Oh, you got, then like 2 minutes later, hear them say, okay, line up. That's happened so many times.
Not
So
enough time.
class ahead, that's what you should say. Okay, I'm gonna get myself ready now. But yeah, when I pump up, it's like I'll do like push-ups, I'll do a row, I'll do a side lateral, and I'll do a curl. That's it. And I'll just do 10 very poised reps, like nice and controlled, not rushing. So just do 10, go to the next exercise, do 10, do a circuit, and then I rest. I'll just chill. And I'm just really staying calm and just getting a nice controlled pump that way. And then when I get on stage, I'm not gassed or winded. It's huge. It's if you're not gassed when you get out there, you're going to be so much more in control of your posing, a lot more poise, and that's definitely, I think, a big factor as to why I was able to squeak out a win, was because of that. Because my posing was like spot on. The other guys were like fading after just about 3 or 4 poses. You could hear them just like gasping for air.
Yeah. And like the other thing is obviously, like when you get on stage and you're gassed, your tan's gonna run, you're gonna look messy, and you're gonna be too hot under the lights, and
Yeah, because
just getting on there with the poise is key.
you yeah, you factor your adrenaline's going as well. Like you're gonna get out there and you'll be like, I want to win. I'm competitive, so you're amped. Then you got some fatigue set in from the posing. You see a lot of guys shaking when they're posing. Some of them cramp up. So
Yeah.
it's like you really, from the time you start pumping up, you need to be just totally in control, poised, relaxed. When you get on stage, when you're hitting your poses, I can tell you that when you pose at 100%, meaning if you're flexing down as hard as you possibly can, you're going to fatigue out really early because it's a lot of energy going out. But if you just like let up just a little bit, you hit them at, let's say, 85, 90% tension, it does not change the look. You're still going to see
Yeah.
all your definition, but you're going to be you're going to be able to smile because you're not grimacing and grunting, like it's a 600-pound deadlift. You're just like in total control. And if it's a long prejudging, like if it's a dog fight, you're going to last a lot longer because you're in total control. And that's basically what happened at the Pro International. It was like probably a 20 to 30 minute prejudging. And I remember the head judge saying, you guys need a break? And I'm like, no, I just shook my head. No, let's keep it going. I could have did that all day. I was in total control. Not to sound arrogant. That's just how it was. Just that makes a huge difference in your posing.
Yeah, and I guess that's that's a testament to your practice and the hours that you probably put into your posing, and knowing how much poise and how much you need to sort of like tense or contract each muscle to gain that control over things, I suppose. Like, and you obviously recording yourself posing as well, because you do the vlogs and you do your posing updates. You'll probably be able to see, okay, like I know I was maybe not contracting I need to contract just a little bit more just to gain that full tension or something like that. So that's obviously something that's not protruding to the show day itself, but it's important that you do give enough time to your posing, otherwise you're going to put yourself on stage short.
That's if you think about it, there's 4 aspects to prep. There's your nutrition, there's your cardio, there's your weight training, there's posing. It's 25% of the puzzle. So if you're not well prepared leading into that show, that would be the same equivalent of you not paying attention to your diet. You're not going to be prepared. So it's frustrating for me as more of a spectator. It's frustrating as a spectator sitting in the audience, looking at some guys up there that they didn't practice posing. If they're shaking, trembling, their posture's bad. You're just like, okay, they basically just winging it. So it's important. Like, you want to make sure that you're dialed in with your presentation, because you don't want to give all your weeks and weeks of work a disservice either. You worked hard to be up there to celebrate that day. And if you're celebrating it with really shitty posing, then not only are you letting yourself, you're letting the spectators down, the judges down, but most importantly, you're letting yourself down.
I totally agreed. Yeah. It is a shame, because you do see, like you said, you see some great physiques and you're like, wow, like they're just like not even opening up their back on a rear double, like they're just contracting their lats downwards, and it's just like you've got a huge back and you can't even see it.
Yeah.
It's so upsetting, right?
It's exactly like I remember competing against Eric Helms in 2009 before we started coaching and all that. And backstage, he just looked like an average guy. He didn't, he wasn't real muscular. He didn't appear that way anyway. Just backstage walking
Yeah.
around, he just didn't look like a lot. But after my class was over, I was in the middleweights. He was in the, I think, light heavies. I went out, or
Okay.
it might have been, I can't remember. But I went to the audience to watch his prejudging, and he came to life. It was like, oh, wow, this dude is totally transformed himself through the posing. And it was like, wow, he still had some work to do, but I mean, his posing was really good at that time, and it made a huge difference. So here I thought this guy backstage wasn't really all that much, but he turned out to be really well. And his posing actually got him his pro card. Because when he won his pro card, the guy should have beat him, but the guy just did not know how to pose. The guy was more conditioned, a little more muscular, but Eric just was on point with posing, and he presented himself a little bit better, and actually a lot better, and he walked away at the win because of the posing. So it makes a huge difference. And I think too many guys just neglect it a little too much. So just remember, it's 25% of the puzzle.
Yeah, no, you do see that, like with Eric, obviously that's a great example, and you do see that especially in like over here in the UK, and I'm sure it's the same in the US when you have sort of like teenage and junior categories. They're not necessarily weight split, so you'll have like when I competed as a junior, I was up against one guy that was like 25 pounds heavier on me on stage, so you have like huge comparisons in body weight, so you really have to be able to pose yourself to your best ability and show off everything perfectly to be able to catch up with these guys that have got more mass. It's true. It's funny how, people relaxed can look like, you're like, do you even lift? And then they suddenly pose and they pop and they have this huge, like, suddenly their frame just takes off. But it is crazy to see that with some individuals. It's just like this perfect remedy for, like, it's normally structure related, I guess, isn't it? It's like the waist, the tie-ins, and the muscle bellies that all make up the overall shot that relaxed might not look so impressive.
I think the ultimate example you could look at in our sport is Brian Whitaker. He's world champion in 2015. Like, he's 160 pounds. I mean, he's not the biggest guy at all, when you see him in person, he's like, he doesn't seem like a big guy. Gets out on stage though, and the posing is flawless. And you add that to the conditioning and the symmetry, and it's like, whoa, this guy all of a sudden is a gym. And he walks away with 2 world titles. So the posing was a big part of that. Big part of that.
Yeah, sure. Just to cover one more thing on Backstage, have you got any sort of protocols that athletes do use immediately pre-stage with regards to potential sodium or like a food option that you might have them just have right immediately before they go on stage or during pump up?
Yeah, usually like 5-10 minutes before we go to pump up, it's like, okay, let's get in, depending on the athlete, maybe 1 to 2 grams of sodium, basically chase it down with some water. And then basically maybe 30, 40 grams of carbs, some type of simple carb. Maybe it's like a half a Pop-Tart or a Pop-Tart or some other form of carb that's really easy to digest, gets quick. And that's just to help pump up. That's to help. But by the time you get on stage, that's probably getting in your system. That's going to help you, continue posing for that energy, and that's keeps you going. So, and just some water while you're pumping up, no doubt. So that's generally like kind of like the last, like right before popping up, yeah.
Nice, yeah. That's something that I think I learned that from one of your videos or some content from 3DMJ, and started doing that with athletes, and usually the feedback is, wow, I got a crazy pump just immediately from that sodium hit. And obviously some people do it via food, but usually it's like you said, half a teaspoon or a teaspoon of salt in some water, and it's pretty much a go for having a pump.
Yeah, raises the blood pressure, so it helps, to get you a little bit better pump.
Yeah, nice, awesome. Okay, Jeff. Well, I think we've covered a lot here. I think we've covered a great amount with regards to the show day itself. And I'm sure that listeners will take home a lot from this. Is there anything specific that you potentially think we've missed out, or you'd like to add to the discussion that people think they can take away and apply to their show day? But if not, we'll sort of wrap things up.
I just think in general, just remember like what we started with. You just treat the show day as a celebration, and if you go at it from that aspect, you'll enjoy yourself a lot more. Of course, you want to be competitive. You know, when you're on stage, be competitive, but everything else, embrace it. Like the people backstage, you know, open up, be friendly, meet new people. Don't be closed down and so competitive that you don't enjoy yourself back there. But yeah, just celebrate your hard work. That's what it's all about. That day is your day to celebrate. And then everything else is like I said, don't get crazy during peak week. Don't get crazy on show day with all these voodoo-ish stuff. Keep things pretty consistent. Keep all your variables in line. Make sure you set your environment up to where it kind of mimics your normal day-to-day stuff. And I think that's, in general, the most part. So worst case scenario, even if something does go wrong, if you have your variables in order, it's not going to be all that wrong. So it's in a nutshell, yeah.
Amazing. Well, Jeff, thank you so much for your time. I really do appreciate it, and I wish you the best of luck with the rest of your prep this year. I know that Jeff is 21 weeks out from the Mayhem, which may well be your first show. So that's really, really exciting, and for listeners as well, thank you very much for listening. I would like to also recommend that you go and follow, if you're not already, follow Jeff on his Instagram, which I'll link below, which is 3DMJ Godfather, and also follow the Team 3DMJ YouTube channel. Also subscribe to their podcast on the iTunes app and the YouTube channel as well, because all superb pieces of content. But yeah, thanks again, Jeff, and thanks to the listeners for listening, and we'll catch you in the next one. Cheers, Jeff.
Cool. Thank you.